Today we're going to run through the scenarios for Oklahoma and other teams getting into the college football playoff and all that's coming up after the bumper.
What do you mean you don't subscribe to my son's YouTube channel?
Mama, no!
Just snap the damn ball, RJ.
What's up, kid folk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always OU related, college football related, sports related. We have a good time. And today we're going to run through the scenarios for teams getting into the college football playoff. But first, I got this book coming out. Comes out October 23rd. It is called Let It Bang. It's mine. It would mean quite a bit to me if you bought it. Seriously. I mean, I put a lot of effort into it. It's like 2 years of my work, and it is actually the thing that pays the bills around here. Also, just a note about Baker Mayfield and Hollywood Brown. The first one is Baker Mayfield played a bad game against the Chargers on Sunday. I mean, he had like a 50% completion rate, and I think his QBR was like 14.6. But for the first time in 20 years, everybody agrees that quarterback is not the problem for the Cleveland Browns. That is remarkable. Think about how many quarterbacks have played for the Cleveland Browns since like 2000. Think about how many of them have won Heisman trophies. Think about how many of them were tapped as the number 1, number 2 overall pick for the Cleveland Browns. And think about how bad Hugh Jackson has been as a head coach. And I love how everybody's solution, at least on this channel on Twitter, for the Cleveland Browns is to give Baker Mayfield more Sooners to play with, like Sterling Shepard at wideout, like D.D. Westbrook at wideout, like Demetri Flowers at fullback. But we all draw the line at making Lincoln Riley the Cleveland Browns head coach. And I think that's just awesome. And a note about Hollywood Brown, every time I see Tyreek Hill out there catching passes from Pat Mahomes, I think Hollywood Brown is going to make a lot of money. Because, check it, Hollywood Brown has more yardage, more touchdowns, and for you hype people, is an inch taller than Tyreek Hill. And you know what? I think he's faster than Tyreek Hill. What I'm saying is the game is becoming more and more open and more about team speed. Think about Jakeem Grant out there at Miami. Think about what Kenny Stills is doing at Miami. Think about Brandon Cooks. You no longer have to be a tree to play wide receiver in the NFL. You just have to have flat out speed and a quarterback that can't overthrow you. I think Hollywood Brown is going to go in the late first round in the NFL draft, and his comp is Tyreek Hill, and everybody's watching what Tyreek Hill is being able to do with Pat Mahomes. But also we have to take into account you got to play in a system that allows for speed and short dudes to go do work. And that might not be the kind of team that Hollywood gets drafted by, but say he ended up with the Green Bay Packers and Aaron Rodgers, that could be a formidable duo. Or Deshaun Watson at Houston, that could be a formidable duo alongside DeAndre Hopkins. Hello. I just don't want him to end up at the Cowboys because I know that he'll rot out there. All right, now let's get into the scenarios for teams getting into the college football playoff. And we're going to start with the bottom, and then we're going to go to Oklahoma. So is there a scenario for which the UCF Knights could get into the college football playoff? Sure. Josh Heupel's undefeated team could get into the college football playoff, but that would mean that Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Oklahoma, Texas, everybody would have to not just take one loss, but possibly two, just to get UCF a good look, because UCF's quality wins are trash. And if you look at their opponents' records, they're 14-24. They ain't playing any good teams, and they needed a late surge to beat Memphis. I know that Memphis has one of the best running backs in college football, but still, it's Memphis. It ain't Mississippi State, and they ain't very good. Then their lone Power 5 win is Pitt, and if Pitt would have beat Notre Dame, I'd put more stock into that. But Pitt didn't beat Notre Dame, even when Notre Dame looked like absolute garbage and Pittsburgh was making it up as they went along in South Bend. It's going to be really hard for a group of 5 team, that be Cincinnati, South Florida, or UCF, to get into the college football playoff because their strength of schedule is just trash. However, I believe that if you go unbeaten, you should get a shot at the title. They won't, but I still believe it. And at this point, if UCF is going to be so much better than the people that they play in the American and the people that they play in non-conference, they should just push for the ACC, get into a Power 5 conference so you don't have to have this argument anymore and you don't have to make up national championships, which I want to give you, but nobody else does. The next scenario is Clemson, for which they get past NC State. I think they can take a loss and still win the ACC title and get into the college football playoff based on pedigree, based on defense, and Trevor Lawrence looks like the next great Heisman Trophy candidate next year, 2 years from now. However, that is one of the marquee matchups of this weekend. I think NC State has enough defense to play with Clemson, but I think Clemson will just pull it out in the end. Now, can the SEC get 2 teams in? Absolutely. Now, it's harder because Georgia took a loss to LSU, but they could still get in because Georgia could make it through the SEC East into the title game and win the conference title game over, say, Alabama. And a one-loss Alabama team is still getting into the college football playoff, especially if they win their division this year, which they didn't last year, and they still got into the college football playoff. So pretty much write Alabama out in red ink into your college football playoff scenarios. That said, if LSU runs the table and beats Alabama and then wins the conference title, I could again see LSU and Alabama getting into the college football playoff. Plus, LSU has the best case of any college football team to get into the college football playoff right now. Yeah, it took a loss, but the overall record of its opponents is 33-15, and they got a Georgia win, and that Florida team that beat them is turning out to be pretty good and is going to be a problem for the rest of its schedule. Now, can the Big Ten get 2 teams in? Yes, it can. Because if Michigan wins out, they're getting in because their lone loss would have been to Notre Dame, and everybody knows Notre Dame is undefeated, and there's a lot of Notre Dame bias, which I'll get into later. Also, a one-loss Ohio State team to a good Michigan team still gets in because it will have a power conference title and beat everybody on their schedule except Michigan. Again, Michigan got beat by a good Notre Dame team. There's also a scenario in place for Iowa getting into the college football playoff if they finish out the season 12-1, and now that win over Iowa State is looking better and better. So that's one to keep your eye on, but I would expect one team to get out of the Big Ten, but there are scenarios for 2. Now, the Pac-12 is probably done, but if Washington State can make it all the way through its schedule with a Pac-12 championship, it's possible. The same with Oregon, the same with Colorado. But Washington, USC, and Stanford each have 2 losses, and Notre Dame could potentially have the head-to-head match over Stanford and USC. I just don't think it's that strong a conference, and I don't think the selection committee does either. Especially when you take into account strength of schedule. Colorado's strength of schedule ranks 117th in the country. Washington's ranks 126th, and Oregon's ranks 130. The Pac-12 is just a watered-down league this year. It ain't very good. Now we get to Notre Dame, who, if they win out, is absolutely getting in the college football playoff. And that is why Oklahoma has a Notre Dame problem. But more than that, the Big 12 has a Notre Dame problem. Because at best, the Big 12 is going to finish with a one-loss conference champ. So Oklahoma needs to win out and Notre Dame needs to lose for Oklahoma to have an opportunity to get into the college football playoff. But even then, you've got a one-loss conference champ in Oklahoma who potentially would have a win over West Virginia or Texas or Iowa State should it win the Big 12 championship. But also you'd have a Notre Dame team that's on national television all the time, who has a following, and you got selection committee bias because nobody is going to hold that soft Pittsburgh win against them. I would, you would, but nobody else is gonna. They're gonna look at the record and say, they were 12-1 with wins over USC and Stanford, who were pretty good this year, as well as Michigan. And that's a big one because it turns out Michigan is better than what we thought when they played Notre Dame on the road. So Oklahoma needs to take care of business on its front, but it also needs somebody to step up and beat Notre Dame, or we're going to have a real problem and we play in a New Year's Six Bowl, but not the one that we want. All right, that's it for me. Deuces.